They say revenge is a dish best served cold, but I prefer mine ice cold with a side of financial ruin. My name is Diana Cross, and this is the story of how I turned my manager's betrayal into the most expensive mistake of his career. What started as corporate theft ended with a boardroom bloodbath that made headlines across the tech industry. I should have known Marcus Hendricks was trouble the moment he walked into Zenith Technologies with his perfectly pressed suits and that smile that never quite reached his eyes. He'd been hired as our new VP of Product Development, swooping in from some Silicon Valley startup with promises of innovation and growth. I was naive enough to believe that talent and hard work would be enough to earn his respect. I'd been at Zenith for 3 years, working my way up from junior analyst to senior product strategist. The company specialized in enterprise software solutions, and while we weren't exactly cutting edge, we were steady and profitable. That was until Marcus arrived with his grand vision to revolutionize our entire product line. The idea came to me on a Tuesday morning in October, during one of those mind-numbing quarterly reviews. I was sitting in the conference room, half listening to Marcus drone on about market penetration and user acquisition, when it hit me like lightning. What if we could create an AI-powered middleware that could seamlessly integrate with any existing enterprise system, regardless of platform or architecture? It would be like a universal translator for business software. I spent the next 3 weeks developing the concept. Late nights, early mornings, weekends sacrificed to code and calculations. I called it Nexus Bridge, and it was beautiful. The technical specifications alone filled 47 pages. But the real magic was in the algorithms I'd designed to handle the data translation. This wasn't just another software patch. This was revolutionary technology that could save companies millions in integration costs. The presentation I prepared was flawless. Charts, graphs, projected revenue streams, implementation timelines. I'd even built a working prototype that I'd tested with 3 different enterprise systems. The results were phenomenal. Nexus Bridge could reduce integration time by 78% while maintaining 99.7% data accuracy. In the enterprise software world, those numbers were nothing short of miraculous. I requested a meeting with Marcus on a Thursday afternoon. His corner office was a shrine to corporate success, walls lined with awards and photos of him shaking hands with tech industry luminaries. He gestured for me to sit across from his mahogany desk, and I launched into my presentation with the enthusiasm of someone who believed they were about to change the world. "This is interesting, Diana," Marcus said after I'd finished, his fingers steepled in front of him. "But I'm not sure the market is ready for this level of complexity." My heart sank. "With respect, Marcus, I've done extensive market research. The demand for integration solutions is growing by 23% annually. This could position Zenith as the industry leader." He leaned back in his chair, studying me with those cold, gray eyes. "I appreciate your initiative, but I think you're overestimating both the market opportunity and your own technical capabilities. This would require resources we simply don't have." "But the prototype works perfectly. I've tested it on—" "Diana." His voice carried a warning. "I've been in this industry for 15 years. I know what works and what doesn't. This idea needs significant refinement before it's ready for consideration." I left his office feeling deflated but not defeated. Marcus had asked me to document everything and send it to him for further review. I should have seen the red flags then. But I was too invested in the idea to recognize the predator sitting across from me. 2 weeks later, I was in the company break room when I overheard Jennifer from accounting talking to someone on her phone. "Yeah, Marcus is presenting some big new product initiative to the board next week. Something about AI integration. He's been working on it for months, apparently." The coffee mug slipped from my hands, shattering on the floor. Months? I'd only shown him Nexus Bridge 2 weeks ago. I cleaned up the mess with shaking hands, my mind racing through the implications. That evening, I did something that would have horrified my younger, more trusting self. I hacked into Marcus's work email. It wasn't difficult. Zenith's security was laughably outdated, and I'd helped set up the system architecture 2 years earlier. What I found made my blood run cold. There, in his sent folder, was my entire presentation. My charts, my code, my algorithms. all of it reformatted with his name in the header. He'd changed the name from Nexus Bridge to Synergy Link and tweaked some of the technical language, but it was unmistakably my work. The email was addressed to the entire executive team, with a meeting scheduled for the following Tuesday. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the email he'd sent to his former colleague at TechFlow Industries, our biggest competitor. Got something that might interest you, he'd written. Revolutionary integration technology. Let's discuss licensing opportunities after I lock down the patents. He wasn't just stealing my idea, he was planning to sell it to our competition. I sat in my apartment that night, staring at my laptop screen, feeling like my entire world had crumbled. 3 years of loyalty, of 60-hour weeks and skipped vacations. And this was how I was repaid. But as the initial shock wore off, something else began to take its place. Something cold and calculating and absolutely furious. Marcus had made one crucial mistake. He'd underestimated me. The next morning, I walked into the office with a smile on my face and revenge in my heart. I had 6 days until Marcus presented my idea to the board, and I intended to make every single one of them count. First, I needed allies. Jennifer from accounting had always been friendly. And more importantly, she had access to budget information and board communications. I approached her during lunch, carefully probing about the upcoming presentation. "Oh, that's Marcus's big secret project," she said, rolling her eyes. "He's been so mysterious about it, acting like he's about to cure cancer or something. Between you and me, I think he's trying to position himself for the CEO role when Peterson retires." Perfect. Marcus wasn't just stealing my idea. He was using it as a stepping stone to the top of the company. That made this personal. Next, I reached out to my contact at TechFlow Industries. David Kim had been my classmate at MIT, and we'd stayed in touch over the years. He was now their VP of Strategic Acquisitions, which meant he was exactly the person Marcus would be dealing with. "Diana, what a pleasant surprise," David said when I called him. "How are things at Zenith?" "Interesting," I replied carefully. "I was wondering if we could meet for coffee. I have something I'd like to discuss with you." We met at a small cafe downtown, away from both our offices. David listened intently as I explained the situation, my stolen idea, and Marcus's plan to sell it to TechFlow. That's actually brilliant," David said after I'd finished explaining the technical specifications. "This could revolutionize enterprise integration, but you're saying your manager stole it?" "I have all the documentation to prove it. Original files, timestamps, email records. The question is, what's it worth to you?" David's eyes lit up. "Diana, if this technology works as well as you claim, it could be worth tens of millions to the right company. Maybe more. Then I have a proposition for you." I laid out my plan. It was audacious, probably illegal in several states, and absolutely perfect. David would agree to meet with Marcus, ostensibly to discuss licensing Synergy Link. But instead of negotiating in good faith, he would string Marcus along, gathering as much technical information as possible while I prepared my counterattack. "You want me to help you destroy your own manager?" David asked. "I want you to help me get justice. Marcus stole $2 million worth of intellectual property. I'm just making sure it ends up in the right hands." David agreed, but he wanted something in return. "If this works, I want exclusive rights to license the technology from you, not from Zenith, from you personally." That was the moment I realized I was about to burn every bridge I'd ever built. But some bridges deserve to be burned. "Deal," I said. The next few days were a carefully choreographed dance of deception. I continued to work on my regular projects, maintaining the facade of the loyal employee while secretly documenting every aspect of Marcus's theft. I copied every email, every file, every piece of evidence that proved Nexus Bridge was my creation. Meanwhile, David was playing his part perfectly. He'd reached out to Marcus, expressing interest in the revolutionary integration technology he'd heard about. Marcus, predictably, took full credit for the innovation, describing it as his passion project that he'd been developing for the better part of a year. I watched from my cubicle as Marcus preened around the office, clearly believing he'd already won. He started dropping hints about a major announcement coming soon, implying that big changes were on the horizon. The other employees looked at him with a mixture of admiration and envy, having no idea they were witnessing a master class in corporate fraud. On Monday, the day before Marcus's presentation to the board, I made my move. I'd spent the weekend preparing a presentation of my own, not just about Nexus Bridge, but about corporate intellectual property theft, the legal ramifications of patent fraud, and the potential financial exposure Zenith faced if they proceeded with Marcus's plan. I included screenshots of his emails, timestamps proving when I'd first created the technology, and expert legal opinions on the potential lawsuits that could result from proceeding with stolen IP. But I didn't send it to the board. Instead, I sent it to 3 people: CEO Peterson, the head of legal, and the chairman of the board. Along with the presentation, I included a simple note: I believe you need to see this before tomorrow's board meeting. I also sent a copy to the local tech industry publication, TechWatch Weekly, with an embargo until after the board meeting, insurance, in case Zenith tried to cover this up. Tuesday morning arrived with all the drama of a Shakespearean tragedy. I arrived at the office early, positioning myself where I could watch the executive floor. At 8:30 a.m., I saw Peterson storm out of his office and march directly to Marcus's corner office. The conversation was brief, but animated, with Peterson doing most of the talking and Marcus looking increasingly pale. At 9:15, 2 security guards escorted Marcus out of the building. He didn't even get to clean out his desk. The board meeting was canceled. Instead, Peterson called an emergency meeting with the legal team. And by noon, the entire office knew something big had happened. Rumors flew through the cubicles like wildfire. Some said Marcus had been caught embezzling. Others claimed he'd been selling company secrets. The truth, as I knew it would, eventually came out. At 2 p.m., Peterson called me into his office. The CEO was a man in his early 60s, with silver hair and the weathered face of someone who'd spent decades navigating corporate politics. He looked exhausted. "Diana," he said, gesturing for me to sit, "I believe we owe you an apology." "Thank you, sir. I've reviewed your documentation, and it's clear that Mr. Hendricks committed serious intellectual property theft. We've already contacted our legal team about pursuing criminal charges." I nodded, maintaining my composure despite the adrenaline coursing through my veins. "The question now," Peterson continued, "is what we do about your technology, Nexus Bridge, I believe you called it." "Yes, sir. It's impressive work, potentially game-changing. We'd like to fast-track it for development, with you as the lead, of course." This was the moment I'd been planning for. "I appreciate the offer, Mr. Peterson, but I'm afraid that's not possible." His eyebrows rose. "Oh, why not?" "Because I've already licensed the technology to TechFlow Industries." The silence that followed was deafening. Peterson stared at me as if I'd spoken in a foreign language. "You, what?" "I licensed Nexus Bridge to TechFlow for $1. The contract was signed this morning." Peterson's face went through several shades of red. "Diana, that technology was developed on company time, using company resources. It belongs to Zenith." "Actually, sir, it doesn't." I pulled out a folder I'd prepared. "I developed Nexus Bridge entirely on my own time, using my own equipment and resources. I have documentation proving that every line of code, every algorithm, every specification was created outside of work hours. According to my employment contract, intellectual property developed independently belongs to the employee." Peterson grabbed the folder, flipping through the meticulously organized documentation. I'd been thorough, documenting every late night and weekend hour, every personal resource I'd used. It was airtight. "You realize," Peterson said slowly, "that this technology could have been worth millions to Zenith." "Yes, sir, approximately $2 million, based on my market analysis." "And you sold it for $1? "I did." "Why?" I looked him directly in the eye. "Because Marcus Hendricks stole my work and tried to profit from it, Because he betrayed my trust and my loyalty to this company. Because he thought he could destroy my career and get away with it. Peterson set down the folder. Diana, I understand you're angry, but I'm not angry. Mr. Peterson, I'm disappointed. Disappointed that a company I believed in would hire someone like Marcus without proper due diligence. Disappointed that when I brought my concerns to him, he dismissed me and then stole my work. Disappointed that it took documented proof of theft for anyone to take this seriously. So you're punishing the entire company because of one man's actions? I'm ensuring that my work ends up where it's properly valued. TechFlow has offered me a position as their new Director of Innovation, with a six-figure signing bonus and equity options. They're also paying me consulting fees for the ongoing development of Nexus Bridge. Peterson looked like he'd been punched in the gut. You're resigning? I'm giving my 2 weeks' notice. Yes. Diana, surely we can work something out. The board would be willing to offer you Marcus's position, a substantial raise. I'm sorry, Mr. Peterson, but the decision is final. I stood up, placing my resignation letter on his desk. I do hope Zenith can recover from this situation. You have good people here who deserve better leadership. The next 2 weeks were a whirlwind. The story broke in TechWatch Weekly, and within hours, it was picked up by major tech publications. Employee Revenge: How One Woman Turned Corporate Theft into a $1 million Mistake was the headline that made me briefly famous in certain circles. Marcus tried to fight the criminal charges, claiming he'd been developing the technology independently. But the evidence was overwhelming. Not only did I have timestamps and documentation proving my ownership, but David had recorded their conversations where Marcus explicitly took credit for work that predated his employment at Zenith. The legal battle was swift and decisive. Marcus was convicted of intellectual property theft and corporate fraud. He was sentenced to 2 years in prison and ordered to pay restitution to both me and Zenith. More importantly, he was banned from holding executive positions in the tech industry for 5 years. But the real victory came 6 months later. When TechFlow launched Nexus Bridge to the market, the technology was everything I'd promised and more. Within the first quarter, it had generated over $15 million in revenue. Companies were lining up to license the integration solution, and TechFlow's stock price surged by 40%. I was featured on the cover of Tech Innovator magazine with the headline, "The Revenge Revolution: How Diana Cross Changed Corporate Ethics Forever." The article detailed not just my story, but the broader implications of intellectual property theft in the tech industry. David, now my business partner and romantic interest, often jokes that Marcus did us the biggest favor of our careers. He thought he was destroying you, he said over dinner one evening. Instead, he launched you into the stratosphere. But it wasn't just about the money or the recognition. It was about justice. It was about proving that loyalty and hard work should be rewarded, not exploited. It was about showing that sometimes the little guy can win. Marcus tried to contact me after his release from prison, wanting to make amends. I never responded. Some people don't deserve second chances, especially when they've proven they'll abuse them. Zenith Technologies never recovered from the scandal. The company struggled for another year before being acquired by a competitor for a fraction of its former value. Peterson retired quietly, and most of the employees found jobs elsewhere. I felt bad for them, but not bad enough to regret my choices. The final irony came 2 years later. When I was invited to speak at a corporate ethics conference, the event was held at a luxury hotel in downtown San Francisco, in the same ballroom where Marcus had once received an industry award for innovative leadership. I stood at the podium, looking out at an audience of executives and entrepreneurs, and told my story. I talked about the importance of protecting intellectual property, the dangers of toxic leadership, and the power of standing up for what's right. Some people might call what I did revenge, I said in closing. But I prefer to think of it as justice. Marcus Hendricks tried to steal my future, so I made sure he didn't have one. Sometimes, the best revenge is simply success. The audience gave me a standing ovation. Several people approached me afterward, sharing their own stories of corporate theft and betrayal. I realized that my experience wasn't unique, It was just one example of a systemic problem in the tech industry. That's when I decided to start my own consulting firm, specializing in intellectual property protection and corporate ethics. The irony wasn't lost on me that Marcus's theft had indirectly launched my dream career. Today, I'm the CEO of Cross Consulting, a firm that helps companies protect their intellectual property and maintain ethical standards. We've prevented dozens of cases of IP theft and helped hundreds of employees protect their innovations. The company's motto, printed on every business card, is simple: innovation deserves protection. I still keep a framed copy of that TechWatch Weekly article on my office wall, not as a trophy, but as a reminder. A reminder that sometimes the most powerful weapon against betrayal is patience, preparation, and the willingness to burn bridges that were already on fire. Marcus is working as a mid-level manager at a small software company in Ohio now. His LinkedIn profile is modest, his ambitions clearly diminished. I check it occasionally, not out of malice, but out of curiosity. He's older, grayer, and presumably wiser. I hope he's learned something from our encounter, though I'm not particularly optimistic. The tech industry has changed since then. There's more awareness about intellectual property rights, more protections for employees, and more consequences for corporate theft. I like to think I played a small part in that evolution. But the most satisfying part of this whole story isn't the money I made or the recognition I received. It's the knowledge that I fought back, that I refused to be a victim, that I turned my manager's betrayal into the foundation of my own success. They say living well is the best revenge. I disagree. The best revenge is turning your enemy's weapon against them and watching them destroy themselves with their own greed and arrogance. Marcus thought he was stealing my idea. Instead, he gave me something far more valuable: the motivation to become everything he pretended to be. He wanted to be an innovator, a leader, a game changer. He ended up being the cautionary tale that launched my career. And every time I sign a new client, every time I help an employee protect their intellectual property, every time I give a speech about corporate ethics, I think about that moment in his office when he dismissed my work with such casual cruelty. He underestimated me once. It was the most expensive mistake of his life. The $1 sale of Nexus Bridge to TechFlow became a legendary case study in business schools, analyzed by professors and students as an example of how corporate betrayal can backfire spectacularly. Marcus's name became synonymous with executive incompetence and ethical failure. But my name became synonymous with something else entirely: the power of turning betrayal into triumph, of transforming theft into justice, of proving that sometimes the best revenge is simply being better than the person who tried to destroy you. And that, more than any amount of money or recognition, is a victory worth savoring.